Hi, everyone. I'm Denise O'Malley. I'm the founder of You Define Wellness, and welcome to another session within the Defining Wellness Confab. You can call it a summit, you can call it a forum, you can call it whatever you want. I like the word confab because it's really an informal, private conversation that we're having here. And if you've been following along, we're doing 48 of these sessions. And what I'm doing is I'm living to the theme of this confab, and that is becoming the director of your own healthcare. And when you're stepping out on your own and you're trying to find your way, one of the hardest things to do is know who to work with. And so what I'm doing is I'm bringing together dozens of some of the health and wellness professionals that I know so that you can get to know them and decide whether or not this is someone that you want to work with and get some great information. And this morning we're going to start off with a conversation with my friend Diana Calvo with Diana Calvo Coaching, talking about a subject that's near and dear to my heart, healing for adult daughters of narcissistic mothers. And see, I can't even say it. So Diana, thank you very much for joining me today. I am so glad that you can, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Denise. Let me go ahead and pull up my slides here, and we will get started in just a moment. Let's see. Just 1 second here.
There you go. Second one over. Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
From the beginning. And then I'm going to do my switch here. All right, does that look good?
It looks perfect.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Denise. Welcome everybody to the Defining Wellness Confab and to this presentation on healing for adult daughters of narcissistic mothers. We're going to take the next 20 minutes or so to talk about maternal narcissism. And what I'm hoping that you'll learn from the conversation is, what it is, the impact of this on adult daughters, what recovery looks like, and some resources that you can take away with you. Before we get right into the material, I just want to take a minute to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Diana Calvo, and I am a thriving survivor of maternal narcissism. So this is a topic that I am also near and dear to my heart, and I'm very passionate about. I'm also a former corporate executive and now a registered psychotherapist. And I like to share that with people just to show an example of what's possible when you do enter into recovery. This is, for me, a pretty dramatic change in life to go from the corporate world into psychotherapy. And it happened for me over a relatively short period of time after I went into recovery and really began to be able to identify with my true self and be more in alignment. And we'll talk more about what that means for the daughters of narcissistic mothers. My approach to well-being is very much informed by Buddhist teachings. Throughout my life, because of the maternal narcissism that I experienced, I felt very much a sense of emptiness inside myself, and like something just wasn't quite right, but I could never put my finger on it. And over the course of the years, I looked for answers to my questions in all different kinds of places. And when I finally stumbled upon Buddhism, I found for myself personally an approach to understanding the human condition and the human experience that I found to be extremely helpful for just feeling better genuinely over the long run. And then finally, I want to share that I'm very passionate about feeling emotions. As the adult daughter of a narcissistic mother, I spent the first 4 decades of my life numbing my emotions and really running from them. And a huge part of the recovery process is to learn how to feel again. And this has been absolutely instrumental to my recovery and has really changed the way I've been able to experience life. It's been extremely liberating. It's been the key to freedom, and it's a place that I'm very well versed through my own experience and in working with clients, and it's a way that I can support others very effectively. So that's about me. But let's get into the topic of narcissism and what is it. So, narcissism is very much about how we relate to ourselves and how we relate to other people. And you can think about it as existing on a spectrum or on a continuum. And on one end of the spectrum, we have healthy self-esteem. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have narcissistic personality disorder. And I think what's important to realize is that narcissism looks very different in different people. If we go to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, there are 9 traits of narcissism that are listed. So things like self-importance, having fantasies of success and power, a belief that you're special or unique, requiring excessive admiration, a sense of entitlement, being interpersonally exploitative, lacking empathy, envying others, and arrogance. But when you look at narcissism in different people, it can look very differently. So people can have any combination of these traits, any number of these traits, and then the traits themselves actually exist on a spectrum as well. So that's narcissism kind of in a general sense, but let's talk more specifically about maternal narcissism. So there are 1.5 million women in the US that have been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, and that's according to the American Psychiatric Association. However, a woman does not need to have full-blown NPD in order to exhibit maternal narcissism. So I think it's very important to make the distinction that there is a difference between narcissistic personality disorder and then narcissism showing up in family dynamics. And again, the full-blown narcissistic personality disorder is not a requirement for the abuse for narcissistic abuse to occur in a family. So what does maternal narcissism look like? Well, Carol McBride wrote a book called Healing the Daughters of Narcissistic Mothers. And this book is, I would say, the current most prominent authority on the topic of maternal narcissism that exists today. And in her book, she has a great questionnaire. There's about 30 or so questions that can help a person to identify whether or not maternal narcissism exists in their family. And I've just picked here 5 of those 30 questions, and they're ones that are applicable to my personal situation. So, does your mother act jealous of you? Yes. Have you consistently questioned whether or not your mother likes you or loves you? Yes. Do you feel you were a slave to your mother? Yes. Are you shamed often by your mother? Yes. Do you feel manipulated in the presence of your mother? Yes. And I think it's really important to acknowledge the difficulty of this topic. So I think there are many people today who would feel shocked to associate these types of behaviors and characteristics with motherhood. So, culturally, motherhood is the ultimate representation of goodness and love. And biologically and psychologically, as human beings, we are programmed with a very deep-seated belief that our mother loves us and has our best interest at heart and would never do anything to hurt us. And so this is a very difficult thing to deal with and to look at partly because of the cultural stigma and the shame that's associated with having this experience. And also because it's just, from a human perspective, it's a very deep-seated belief that's difficult to move past. So that is some of the qualities, but there are many more, and the book is really helpful for helping to identify if narcissism exists in your family. Now, what I've found is that, let's move on and talk about the impact of narcissism on adult daughters. So, from a psychological perspective, in healthy families, mothers meet the emotional needs of their children. What happens in narcissistic families is that children meet the emotional needs of their mothers. So, what does it mean to meet the emotional need of a child? It means that when the daughter is expressing her feelings and her wants, the mother responds with empathy. And that's really about acknowledging the feelings and the wants, taking them seriously, and responding to them. Does not mean that daughter gets what she wants all the time. The answer can be no, but it's about taking it seriously, responding, and acknowledging. That is what doesn't happen in narcissistic families. And it's very important to recognize that it's this process between mothers and daughters of how the mother responds to those feelings and to those wants that helps a daughter grow emotionally and psychologically in a normal, healthy way. So in the case of narcissistic families, because this isn't happening, the daughter does not develop a true self. And again, here, when we say true self, we're talking about knowing how you feel and knowing what you want. And instead, the daughter learns to repress that true self, and she creates a fake self in exchange for parental love. So the idea is, I'm not going to be who I truly am. I'm going to be who it is that you need me to be. And this can start at an extremely young age for daughters. And as we know, anything that happens up until the age of 7 really is what sets the tone for the rest of our lives. And this is really the tragedy, in my opinion, and it's the source psychologically for all the suffering that happens later in throughout childhood and later into adulthood until a woman decides to enter into recovery. So going back to Carol McBride's book, she talks about a number of ways that this impacts adult daughters, and I've selected a couple of them here to share with you. Having a sense of emptiness, a lack of contentment, struggle with love relationships, difficulty trusting people, can't trust your own feelings, crippling self-doubt, can't create your own authentic life or self. And I think all of these are no doubt true. It also seems, though, that this way of living is so deeply ingrained in the adult daughter that it can be difficult to really articulate these particular experiences, even though they're happening. It's kind of like they're as pervasive as just the air that we breathe. It's just the way that we experience life, and so sometimes it's hard to really see it clearly. And what I've experienced is that a lot of times these particular things are not necessarily what motivate an adult daughter to begin the search for help, whether that's therapy or other types of healing. Sometimes, and oftentimes, these are more the types of questions that will show up and that will begin an adult have an adult daughter begin her journey. So things like, why do I have no idea what makes me happy or brings me joy? Why do I have no idea what my purpose in life is? Why do I have no idea who I am? Why do I feel everything I do is meaningless? Why do interactions with other people always end up hurting me? So as you can imagine, this is a very painful way to live. And it isn't until a woman realizes that her experience of life has been shaped by her childhood experience, and in particular, maternal narcissism, and that she enters into recovery. This is when she's really able to start to live life differently and find answers to these questions. So let's talk about what recovery looks like. I think it's really helpful to start with what is not required for recovery. Forgiveness is one. So we can actually go through successful recovery without having to forgive our mothers. We also don't need to blame them. And we also don't need to have any kind of big confrontation. I know for me personally, this was always a big fear of mine, that I couldn't fully recover unless I sat down with my mother and told her what had happened to me and how I felt about it, and basically put myself in the position yet again to not be acknowledged, not be listened to, and not be responded to. So the good news is that confrontation is not required for recovery. But what is required is everything else, I like to say. So, what we're talking about here is healing from emotional abuse, healing from trauma, healing from child abuse. And so it's a big deal. Healing really requires feeling emotions that we've been running from our entire lives. It requires a deep examination of ourselves. It requires radical personal responsibility. And it requires trying on unfamiliar ways of being in the world. And so it takes an incredible amount of courage and commitment and grit to go through recovery, but absolutely worth it. So if we talk for a second about the recovery process that Carol McBride has presented in her book, she talks about 5 steps to recovery. And the first one is acceptance and grief. And this is the hardest step of the 5. And again, it comes back to what I talked about earlier. It's very difficult to look back at our mothers and accept that there were some limitations in the way that they mothered us. And there's a tremendous amount of grief that comes up when we realize the truth of what happened. And through the grieving process, a whole bunch of other difficult emotions show up. A lot of anger, a lot of resentment, a lot of sadness. So this is a tough part to go through, and it can take some time to really get through it. But if you're willing to do it, this is where you actually process the trauma and let it go. Through the experience of feeling those feelings and letting the energy of those emotions leave your body, you actually can experience true change. And this is a place where, as I mentioned before, I have a tremendous amount of experience and can really support clients as they go through this process. The second step is around separation or individuation. So it's important to realize that in the healthy development of a human being, there's a very normal process of separation where the child separates in terms of their identity, separates from their parents. And in the case of narcissistic families, we didn't get to have that experience in a healthy way as children. And so what we need to do is now separate and go have that experience now as adults. Becoming the woman I truly am is the third step. And this is where we really learn to sense and trust our intuition, and also learn to understand when we're being triggered and how we respond to triggers, and choosing a way to respond differently now. The fourth step is dealing with mother during recovery. And this is around a lot of issues around how are we going to continue to relate to our mother if we are. So there's questions around and the process of making choices, thoughtful choices around how are we going to interact with a mother who's aging and may need additional care. How do we think about and our relationship with our mother if our mother has died? And then there's also the question of how will we continue this relationship going forward? Will we maintain contact? Will we make the choice to stop contact? Or will we do some kind of solution that's in between those two? And then finally, ending the narcissistic legacy. And in this step is where we really look at our relationships that we're in as adults. So our relationships to our children as parents, our love relationships, our relationships with friends, and start to examine those relationships and to take an honest look to see if we're repeating the patterns from our childhood. That's the subconscious tendency, is to enter into relationships that repeat what we knew as children just because it's familiar. So now we have a chance to reevaluate those relationships and make conscious choices about who we're going to be in relationship with. So in my own work supporting clients in recovery, I just want to share with you a couple things about what that looks like. One is that my support work is inclusive of McBride's 5 steps. I'm also take a very holistic approach. So I believe that each one of us is much more than just a brain, even though we are trained to live there in our minds, just thinking all the time. I like to support clients in becoming embodied and living in the body first, with the mind supporting us. I often see the recovery process as being a little bit about skills training, a little bit about mindfulness, and a little bit about spirituality. I certainly come to this work with my own personal journey around maternal narcissism, but I'm very respectful of the unique journey of each individual. And the healing work that I do is deep and long-lasting. So I just want to finish up with some resources in case these could be helpful for you on your own journey. The first one is I strongly want to recommend Carol McBride's book, Will I Ever Be Good Enough? This book is very comprehensive. If you are uncertain if you have maternal narcissism in your family, but suspect that you might, reading the book will make it very clear for you whether or not that's your situation. I also want to suggest Expect Miracles. This is a book that I co-authored with a couple other people. And if you're interested in taking a look at that, I have my own chapter in that book where I talk more specifically about my own journey with maternal narcissism. And it walks through some examples of how maternal narcissism played out in all these different facets of my life as an adult. And then also more details around my process for learning how to feel my emotions again, and the freedom that came from making that decision. And then finally, I also wanted to suggest my website, dianacalvocoaching.com. I have a blog on there where I frequently write short pieces on the topic of narcissism. And if you're interested in some shorter reading, I think there are some articles there that you might find of interest. So thank you so much for being here. And just a reminder, if you are someone who has a narcissistic mother, you can experience life differently. I'm living proof of that, and there's many other women who are finding that out as well for themselves. And it's a beautiful thing to live life on purpose. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Diana. That was that takes a lot of vulnerability and to present that kind of information. I know you've worked through it, but I really appreciate you sharing it. I do have a couple of questions for you. So I would never just define my mother as narcissistic, but she's certainly on the spectrum of martyrdom. So where does martyrdom fit in with narcissism?
Yeah, that's a great question. And is actually one of the traits. So I think it would be a question of, does your mom have the martyrdom characteristic and any of the other ones as well? That's what I would take a look at and see, because it's a part of it. It's a part of the syndrome.
Yeah. So when you had first approached me with this topic, and I was, of course, bells went off, and as with so many other people, I've had to work through my stuff too. But I would not have put that label on her. But she definitely fit in that other category. And as you're going through this information, it's like, wow, yeah, that's exactly what I did. And I had to find my own way through it. And so somebody is watching this and saying, wow, just like me, I recognize myself. I recognize my mom. How do they start? How did they start with you?
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest if you suspect maternal narcissism, I really would suggest reading one of those two books. They're both are really incredible resources, and I think you'll quickly be able to get a sense of whether or not it's applicable to your situation. And in terms of working with me, reach out to me. I have the website is a great place to take a look at what I'm up to and what I'm doing, and all my contact information is in there.
Awesome. Now, do you only work with people? I know you're in Colorado. So do you only work with people in Colorado, or can you work with anyone anywhere in the world?
Anyone, anywhere in the world. I do see people in person here in Colorado in Boulder right now, but I also do work over the phone and through Zoom calls.
All right. One of the things that I feel compelled to point out is as we are growing up, at least as I was growing up, I had a definition of what motherhood should look like. And for me, it was the Toll House cookie mom. And, come home from school, she has a plate of warm, fresh cookies for you. And how was your day, sweetie? And all those things. So is that part of the healing process, is reconciling our own definition of what we thought motherhood should be like?
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. And it's a big part of grieving, is to realize that I didn't have the mother that I wish I had had. I didn't have the childhood that I wished I had had. And it might even be that, I lost significant years of my life in this state of suffering, and I could have lived those years differently if I had known about this sooner.
Yeah.
So I do think that's a big part of it. But the other thing I want to mention is that, this isn't about villainizing mothers, and it's not about going back in time to, perhaps more traditional notions of how women should be living their lives. But this is more about realizing that there is something very special about the mother-child relationship that has to do with empathy. And it's just because some of us, some mothers, don't have the empathy gene, and it's really, unfortunately, because of how they were raised and some of their own wounds too. So it's really about just acceptance of the truth of what happened, and not villainizing.
I really appreciate you sharing all this information. This
Mm.
is the point in time where I get to tell everyone about You Define Wellness and our provider network. And there we go. Diana is part of the You Define Wellness provider network. And what it is, for those who are unfamiliar with our company, we're about three and a half years old, but we started from nowhere and we're growing by leaps and bounds. In fact, today we have hundreds of health and wellness professionals across the country, like Diana, and many, many, many other modalities out there. And these are typically things that are not covered by health insurance. And um, there are a lot of provider lists on the internet, and you can search for it and you'll find a ton of them out there. And what sets us apart is that ours, and it can be accessed by the public. You don't have to be a client of ours to access it, but ours is a vetted directory. And what that means is that we have done a criminal background investigation. We have looked at their licenses to see if there's any disciplinary actions or stipulations against them. We have ensured that they are a legal business. We are checking out what their reputation is. And so while you should never take that as the end all be all when you're choosing a provider, you need to do your own due diligence. At least you have that as confirmation, and that it's not a list where just anyone can join. Ours, you have to be accepted to it. And with this provider network, we can do things in the community, like create an employee benefit program, because as I said, many of the services in our program are not covered under medical insurance. So this is an employer subsidized way for you to participate in the services that are offered, like Diana's out there. We also have an education catalog. These are programs that our network providers have prepared, and some of them are available worldwide. So if you're looking for an education speaker on health and wellness, come to our catalog. You can download the catalog for free. There are dozens and dozens of topics on there, and we are expanding them almost every single day. So take a look at that catalog. And then the other thing is we had a lot of individuals who came to us and said, we don't have the employee benefit plan in place, but we want to play too. We want to save money on these types of health and wellness services. So we created a discount card for you. And it's for individuals, the self-employed, retirees, anybody who is not covered underneath our employee benefit plan. So that when you present it to one of the providers in our network who accepts it, you can receive a discount on their products or services. There is a one-time fee of $99 to purchase this card. It is available at half price through the end of July 2019. So we encourage you to get it now, and it never expires. And you can share it with everyone in your family, all your friends, your next door neighbor, whoever is presenting it can use it and receive the discounts. And you can learn more at our website at youdefinewellness.com. And while you're there, take a look at the Holistic Healing Workplace Crisis Support Team. This is another thing we can do with a network of health and wellness professionals. Our people are passionate about helping out and serving in the community. And one of the worst times, biggest times where they need help is when a crisis has hit the workplace. And employers are told to bring in the counselors and the psychotherapists, and that's good, but we know it's not enough. Because trauma will reside in the body, and if left untreated, it's going to crop up again days, weeks, months, and years later. And so we can bring in a team of people who can help educate the employees as to different paths that they can take in their own healing process. We've already done it and been of service in the community, but now we're launching it as a nonprofit. And in order to do that, we need some funding and community support so that we can provide these services for free or low cost. So if you're interested in helping get the nonprofit off the ground, we invite you to make a donation at paypal.me/youdefinewellness. And you know what? We did a video about this crisis support team during this Defining Wellness Confab. So shoot over to our YouTube page and look for it. You'll find it. But the most important thing right now is, how do you contact Diana? She's already given you some information. Here it is. Write down her phone number. Go to her website. And if you feel that even an exploratory call to see if you're going to be a good fit, but if you feel that she is who you would need to work with on this or any other matter, she's got a whole long list of stuff she can do on her website. You'll find more information. But reach out to her, because that's what this is all about. So with that being said, Diana, thank you for doing this. This was great information out there and we're not seeing it anywhere else. And it's really important because we don't realize sometimes when we're floundering around as adults that maybe it has to do with that which was imprinted upon us many years ago, and that it's okay to work through it, and there is a way to work through it. So I appreciate you sharing this.
Yeah, thank you, Denise. And there's, the topic of maternal narcissism is pretty new to the field. So there isn't a ton of information out there. And there's many women who work with therapists on and off throughout their lives, and narcissism has never even brought up. So I really am grateful for the opportunity to help spread the word about this.
And I think it's a great thing to share with other health and wellness professionals out there, for when somebody comes to them with a, hey, I don't know what my purpose is, that maybe this is an area they need to delve into and give you a referral as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Denise.
And for all of you watching, thank you very much. Wherever you found this recording, shoot over to our YouTube channel. Just put You Define Wellness in the search engine. You will find all 48 of the presentations during this Defining Wellness Confab, plus a whole bunch more information on there. We've been loading videos up for a couple of years, and it's there to help you and be of service to you. So again, thank you, and thank you in the audience, and we hope to see you on another recording soon.